Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Friendly Circle Berlin. My name is Patrick, and it's my great honor to introduce our speaker for today. And this is somebody who I think many of you know. I see lots of people showing up that seem to know our speaker today, so it's great. It seems like a lovely group showing up today. Thank you. And our speaker today is Father Tom W. Father Tom WSJ has been involved with 12-step programs since 1976. A former director of the Jesuit Volunteer Corps and a teacher, he has degrees in counseling, education, and theology. He lectures, counsels, and conducts workshops and seminars internationally. I'm going to turn it over to you, Father Tom. That's it. Thank you.
A moment of power. I unmuted. Yeah. Me? Now do I start? Do I talk about everything now?
Yeah, everything that you wish to.
Okay. Well, listen,
We're open.
hello, old friends and new. My name is Tom, and I'm an alcoholic. I go to Al-Anon meetings because I'm surrounded by crazy people. Um, and I live on the west coast of the United States in some people call it the San Francisco Bay Area. We call it the Oakland Bay Area, and it's the same geography, but a different flavor. Um, I've been sober a long time, and I've been surrounded by sober people for a long time. And I have found it to be life-saving. And I'm happy to share some experience, strength, and hope for a while with you. I'm thrilled to have a Berlin connection. I'm hoping to be in Berlin in December and in Munich in December too, to visit, meet new people, and hang out and do things. And I find I do travel a lot anyway, but if I go to a meeting, it's almost instant friendship, which helps everything. This past weekend, I was in Spokane, Washington, with a group of about 20 people, and most of us were old dogs, but from the Northwest and Idaho and these remote, exotic places you hear about in the movies and on books. But we had one young fellow, he just turned 37 years old and 3 years sober, and he was from Russia, born in the Soviet Union, now living in the States. And it was just a thrill to hear that even young people can get sober, and it is a joy, you know. So, um, what do I know? Um, I know that it's important to understand the disease. My Al-Anon mentor, a woman named Blanche from West Texas, said when she was growing up in Florida, northern Florida, she was told what you don't know can't hurt you. And she said, what I did not know about alcoholism almost killed 4 people. So it's really important to understand alcoholism, addiction, obsessive compulsive behavior, self-destructive stuff. I mean, to learn about those things. And we mostly learn not by attending esoteric lectures, but by hearing people talk about what I was like, what happened, and what I'm like now. It's the power of the program. I think it's very democratic. Recovery is very democratic. Anyone can get sick and anyone can get well, and we don't have a hierarchy. I know some people want to establish, the barely sober, the almost sober, and the extreme sober. I think that will make you crazy. Um, the highest rank, my sponsor told me, the highest rank anybody gets in AA is sober. And whether you have 30 days or 30 years, you're sober. And I had been around long enough to know that someone with 30 days can have great wisdom and peace, and someone with 30 years can be a very crazy person, we would say. And I'm grateful for the steps. I'm one of those guys that goes to meetings. I could always go to a few more meetings. That's generically true across the board, but I find meetings helpful, and I find listening to people helpful. So this is not an official AA or Al-Anon meeting. So I'm going to spin it a little bit. in the States right now, we have some people called spin doctors. And that usually means liars. These are people who lie. They take a nasty piece of reality and try to spin it into something that makes their boss look smart and kind and intelligent and handsome. But that's not what I mean. But I mean by massaging a topic, by working with a topic, by touching a topic, hopefully we connect and we form a bridge and a friendship. This past weekend again in Spokane, I went with a bit of reluctance. Small town, I don't know anybody, reluctance. I was in school there for 2 years, 1969 to 71, and I did not draw a sober breath. But I've been back a bunch of times. In fact, in my drinking and even in fairly early recovery, when I would talk about Spokane, I'd be nasty. I'd be resentful. Those people. I was miserable. It was their fault. I had a lot of harsh things to say about the school I went to and the town it was in. And I would say that casually because I'm one of those extroverts that talks a lot. And my sponsor finally said, after 3 or 4 or 5 years, he said, you know, maybe you should go back to Spokane and look around and just see what was there because your memory is also negative. And as soon as he said that, I stiffened. I don't want to go back there. I suffered there. I don't want to go back there. And then I said, okay, I'll go back there if someone sends me a ticket. And then he said, no, you pay your own way. And I flew to Spokane. And I had a friend of mine also in the community pick me up. At the time he was drinking, he's since gotten sober. Picked me up at the airport. We went to the campus. It'd been 10 years, 15 years. New buildings, old buildings removed. Campus was changed. I started walking around and then I started walking around more quickly and more quickly. And I went through this and I went through that. And I had a high anxiety. And I finally, to calm down, I had to find a place that I knew existed before. And I went to the chapel in the Jesuit faculty residence. And I sat there for a while and I breathed. I have been taught to breathe because if I'm frightened or startled, I can hold my breath. So breathe. And I had about 10 breaths and then 10 breaths. And I realized that I was scared to death. And then I realized that I was scared to death every day for 2 years when I was there before. And the way I dealt with the fear was to drink a lot and act out in adrenaline-filled ways. Well, that really helped. All of a sudden, I kind of relaxed. There was a meeting on campus. I went to it. I walked around. Much of the anxiety was gone, and I made peace with that little piece of geography, realizing it wasn't them, it was me. And that's one of the reasons to do an inventory. You know that the book talks about people and what happened and how did it affect me and what was my part. Well, I contributed a lot to my misery. And now I've been back a dozen times. This weekend, it was lovely. I didn't have the fearful, stupid, mind-numbing stuff, and I was a sober person. And I was with other sober people, many of them brand new to me. A couple I'd met before, but it was a wonderful weekend. As we came to the end, one of the older persons there said, there was no negativity this weekend. And my hearing, I'm almost 80 years old. So my hearing is a little funny sometimes, especially when people have Northwestern accents. And what I heard was there was no nakedness this weekend. but they said negativity, not you see, there's a similarity, and also you see how my brain operates. And when I heard nakedness, I kind of went, "What are they talking about?" And it took 2 or 3 times before I heard negativity, and I went, "Well, you're right. We behaved, we cooperated. There was love in the room. There was gentleness. People behaved like grown-ups who were friendly and in recovery." I think the end result of active alcoholism addiction is a tremendous amount of isolation. Boy, I sure had it. I'm a daily drinker. I'm a drunk driver. Uh, I heard my sponsor talk about that. He said, "I'm a drunk driver." And then he paused and said, "That means I was willing to kill you." And I got my driver's license when I was 16 years old. I lived down in San Jose, and we still had it was still agricultural. We had a lot of orchards. We grew apricots and cherries. This was not peaches, but apricots and cherries. And my dad he was the superintendent of the cannery. So he knew every farmer in the Santa Clara Valley. I mean, those are that's my background. Um, but oh my goodness, I remember driving drunk through some of the orchards. Not a good idea. Um, and part of my alcoholism showed up just in the isolation, uh, negativity, occasional nakedness, but mostly negativity, uh, prejudices, hostility, sarcasm. I remember, no, I'm in my late 20s, and I was studying theology at the Graduate Theological Union here in Berkeley, which is the next town up. We're 12 miles away, and that's not important. But one of my classmates referred to me as being all piss and vinegar, and that's not a compliment. I mean, I thought it was. Oh, yeah, that means strong. No, it means jerk is what it means. But the isolation and I'm better than you, I'm worse than you, but I'm not you. I'm faster than you, I'm slower than you, I'm not you. I'm lighter than you, I'm darker than you, I'm not you. And I get sober, I come into recovery because I got intervened on. I was landed on by a new boss who knew me really well before he was the king. Uh, and I got put into a treatment program that was very AA friendly. And I was there 3 weeks, got out of treatment on a Friday and started my 3rd year of studies on a Monday. And I was not thrilled to be an alcoholic. I was kind of in a daze. Here, where this is I get to the Oakland Bay Area. Fog is one of our realities. In fact, sometimes I listen to the weather report and I'm miles away from the Pacific Ocean. I'm on the east side of the bay. But they'll talk about the Golden Gate Bridge, dense fog advisory on the Golden Gate Bridge. My life had a lot of dense fog advisory. I mean, there was thick. I didn't understand things. I was very sedated. I don't like up. I like down. Um, and I found alcohol to be a lovely suppressant and marijuana a lovely suppressant. And I prefer to be asleep, and I prefer to be unconscious. That's my day. Whew. So I'm a month without a drink, a month without a joint, a month. I went to a meeting just before that, and this fellow at the meeting, most of the people in the room were extremely elderly. I was 29. They were people in their 50s, old people. And I was 29 years old, and a guy younger than me, Vietnam Special Forces, a guy named Gary G. Gary said, we here in Alcoholics Anonymous go to lots of meetings. We don't drink in between meetings, and we don't use no dope. And I just believed him. I had no fight left in. And it was explained to me, primary addiction, secondary addiction. If your primary addiction is alcohol, but your secondary is marijuana, if you keep smoking marijuana, you'll go back to your primary addiction. And so I don't play with all that stuff. And it's legal now. And it comes in 100 different forms. I live in a house, but we have 2 big apartment buildings, one here and one there. And there's always someone smoking dope. Also, that's always been true, but there's always someone smoking dope. And one of my sponsees, marijuana is legal now. And I said, beer's been legal in the United States since 1933, when prohibition was repealed. Legality is not the issue. The issue is what kills me and what helps me live. So I'm very, in the last month or 2 or 3, I've heard some people who, the word snark, it's funny but mean, snark. It's kind of sarcastic. And in a snarky tone, they referred to California sobriety, meaning you're not drinking, but you're smoking dope. And I can tell you that in 1976, it was very clear to us, you don't do that. I don't know who came up with, it's okay to do one, but usually people I know and love, one of the reasons some of the people I know and love keep relapsing onto booze is because they keep smoking dope. So that's what I know. Anyway, there I am in the meeting. And I get out of the meeting and I start going, I get out of treatment and I start going to meetings. I was in school, I was supposed to, and I was able to do some study, but if you've been writing and studying while drinking, it's very different to be writing and studying while sober. I felt impaired, I felt damaged. I didn't have words, vocabulary was limited. I had never written a paper in my life without a beer, And that first year was very awkward, but I passed. I didn't pass with brilliant colors, but I passed. And I was supposed to be ordained a priest. It was held up for a year. And I went back to teach high school kids in Los Angeles. So I went back to my profession. I taught 3 years before already drinking, and I had a great time. I was a very successful teacher. I was also in my early mid-20s. I mean, nothing but energy. I taught history. I had a great time. In fact, last year, I flew to Los Angeles for the 50th anniversary of kids I taught in 1974, and I was not sober. Now, I've met them a couple times since, and they know I'm a sober person. But this year, I went back for the 45th anniversary of kids from 1980, and I was a sober person. And I get there, and there's a whole bunch of them, and they're all now 63 years old. They're all retirement age. And at half a dozen of them came up to me and said, I'm sober now. I've been sober 8 years. I've been sober 35 years. And it was a love. It was such a joyful experience to share recovery. But I mentioned isolation, depression, rage. What my sponsor would point out, and I don't think he just pointed this out to me, he pointed it out to his sponsees. You want to identify rather than compare. You want to identify rather than compare. You want to identify rather than compare. You want to build the bridge. You want to acknowledge the bridge is there. You want to say, oh my goodness, we have things in common. And I did hard work on that for the first 10 years. It's easier now frequently, but it was so against my alcoholism, the resistance, the walls, the anger. But oh my, So in Spokane this past weekend, I identified with all these people, although one or two shared in ways that I said to myself way back here, I think that's crazy. However, I have crazy too. So it's a bond. I think the man who taught me a lot about alcoholism medically, I didn't go out with Dr. Silkworth a lot. Silkworth had a lot to say about alcoholism, and he taught what he knew to Bill Wilson. And Dr. Silkworth is the one who said, allergy of the body, obsession of the mind, the first drink gets you drunk. That's Dr. Silkworth. And Bill, talking about it later at one of the general services, said, until we piece that medical part in, no one got sober. No one stayed sober. Because it's a spiritual malady. It's a medical emergency. It's not just vague, theoretical, esoteric stuff. It is a primary illness that will kill you dead, like a lot of other primary illnesses. So never underestimate the power of the physical in dealing with recovery. Some of the most spiritual advice I've ever been given in recovery is don't get too hungry, too angry, too lonely, too tired, all physical stuff. So I both feet on the ground. I sponsor a couple of people, and sometimes, especially newer folks in recovery, you know, the first 20 years, newer folks in recovery, and they'll call and be very agitated. And I'll, with the wisdom of Socrates, I'll say, "Oh, have you eaten?" Socrates was the one who asked questions until they killed him. Have you eaten? Uh, would you like a glass of water? How have you been sleeping? Practical things. No, I have to figure God out. No, you really need a sandwich and a nap. Maybe a foot massage, but we'll talk once your blood sugar is balanced, okay? So Dr. Gill, not Dr. Silkworth, Dr. Gill, and he was from French-speaking Canada, got sober in the 1960s. I had one of those French accents, so you just thought he was charming beyond imagination. And Gill would talk as an alcoholic in recovery to medical people. And he needed a driver because his eyes weren't very good. And so there were several people who drove Dr. Gill. I was like number 9 on the list, but I got to drive him. And so I heard him present. And you're talking to medical people. It's kind of like talking to church people. These are tough folks to talk to because they think they know everything. You know? So he talked about alcoholism, and he talked about the symptoms, problems of tolerance. You know, you can drink a lot, can't drink anything, blackouts and personality changes, and what happens to all your body parts, you know, when you drink. And he asked for questions, and one of the people there said, "Doctor, it's really a disease? You know, people find that tough." Over the weekend, one of the people on the retreat said, so why is this an allergy? I don't understand the allergy thing. You know, if you're allergic to strawberries and you eat strawberries and you break out in hives, allergy. Alcohol, you drink alcohol and you do awful, terrible things, perhaps, you know, throwing up or being a jerk in 100 ways directly related to alcohol. Most normal drinkers don't do that. Allergy. And talking about it like an allergy or a disease takes it out of the conversation where you're a pervert or a diseased, not diseased person, but you're an evil person, or you're a, you know, all the moral drunkard stuff. It brings it, if you treat it like a disease, people get well. If you treat it like a moral issue or a character issue, people die miserably. That seems to be the pattern. I was, the Jesuit National Day is July 31st. It's the feast of St. Ignatius. And I went to the West Bay for dinner with at the University of San Francisco. And I was sitting with a bunch of people that I really didn't know very well. One was an Irish guy who I'd met before, and he was a pioneer. So one of the Irish ways of dealing with alcoholism was to swear you'd never have a drink, which he did as a young person. And he has never had a drink of alcohol in his life. And he also told me in trouble very quickly. He just knew all that. Very nice guy. I liked him. But we had young guys at the table who were all from India. And they were in San Francisco because they were starting theological studies in the fall. They needed to get more practical English, bigger American vocabulary. So the Irish guy and I were talking, and the Indians were listening, and they asked a few questions. And I said, well, I'm an alcoholic in recovery, and I get to spend a lot of time with alcoholics in recovery. And I get to listen to them, and I lead some retreats for people like that. And this one young fellow, his eyes got really, really big, and he said, "You're alcoholic?" And I said, "Oh, yeah." "How long since you've had a drink?" And I said, a million years. And he said, "You must tell me how you conquered this demon." And I said, "Oh, that's not the way it happened at all. The demon conquered me. I was completely defeated by it." And then I said, it's a question, the powerlessness and the unmanageability, powerless and unmanageable. It was a nightmare. And I finally stopped fighting. And I just don't take the next drink, and I don't have a problem with it, with the drinking, with everything else I still have. But and then I told them a little bit about the program, and I gave them all my business card, and I said, give me a call. I'll take you to a meeting. They never call. They never call. Most people don't want to hear about this. Most people don't want to talk about this. The fact that it's all that we can talk about is one of the signs that we're alcoholics. It bores people otherwise, but I'm absolutely fascinated by your story. Goodness. So step one, the powerlessness, the unmanageability, those were new words to me. I thought failure, drunkard. I don't know. I don't know if it drunk, being a drunk, embarrassed, weak. How's that one? Weak, bad character, pervert. Those are all words that get thrown around addiction. I live in the west coast of the United States, and I was looking at something on YouTube about earthquakes, and earthquakes happen a lot. And Nepal has had some horrific ones. Japan has. All of the Pacific Rim, there's earthquakes and stuff. We had a huge one in April of 1906, and the water mains broke and the city burned, and it was all very exciting. And we've had earthquakes since, and I'm kind of raised with them, and sometimes it's really, really scary stuff. With the earthquake in 1906, the city was ruined, and what happened after the fires went out, people started to rebuild. I was in New Zealand a few years ago. I think it's Christchurch, had a terrific earthquake. People started to rebuild. My friend Jim and Marilyn S. and a few other people went to Hiroshima in Japan last year. After the bomb and the fire was out, people started to rebuild. And I think that's one way of understanding steps 1, 2, 3. The old order is gone. Let's rebuild. And the second step, from my understanding, is it's all about hope. Not willpower. I'll pull myself up by my bootstraps and bootstraps, and I'll take care of myself. And no, 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 you're done. The city has burned. A power greater than ourselves helps us get back on our feet. My experience with it, I had great trouble with step 2. I'm not a hopeful person. I'm half Irish and half Swedish, and neither group is known for perky optimism. So I'm pretty sure we're in trouble most of the time. I just need a little bit of hope. And with step 2, now this is, I hope I can be clear on this. It's not like I figured step 2 out and then I was restored to sanity. Rather, my life started coming back. And I became aware of the fact that a power greater than myself was at work. I kind of woke up to the fact that it was happening. I was staying dry. I was starting to make friends. I was working as best I could. I was taking some responsibilities. I'm getting well. Sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. I was at a meeting in the Midwest. I was sober a couple of years, and it was a big meeting, and they had a fellow talk. And he was full of strong opinions. And he said that the first year of recovery is about physical recovery, and the second year of recovery is about emotional recovery, and the third year of recovery is about spiritual recovery. And I thought that was right on the money. Boy, that made sense to me. And now I think he had 4 years. And that's what he knew. But for me, the first 10 to 15 years were the physical things. The second 10 to 15 was all about learning the language of emotions and identifying them and letting them go. And oh my goodness, fear and anger and grief and sadness and And then the last years, coming to a better understanding of how it all fits together. It's ongoing. It's ongoing. And sometimes the days are shorter and sometimes the days are longer. I try not to say good days, bad days, but some days are shorter and some days are longer. How to connect with the program, how to stay connected with the program. On a regular basis, I need to ask God for help. However you sort out the higher power stuff. Everybody has to kind of do this on their own. I mean, even if you're all members of churches and stuff and groups, everybody sorts this out on their own in some way. We all come to our own understandings. And I pretty much draw on, everything from Genesis to Pope Leo XIV to help my understanding. And sometimes I understand more easily, and sometimes I don't understand anything. Step 3, we talk about turning it over, letting go, surrender. My sponsor was do I have one of his funny little things here? My sponsor was a great believer in the power of the white flag, meaning the war is over and we lost. Stop it. Stop fighting. Stop shooting. I probably have several in the next room. Done. Finished. And early, I mean, there's in Narcotics Anonymous, the words they use for step 3, I was told, do not call this a prayer. The words used in NA for step 3 are take my will in my life, guide me in my recovery, show me how to live. That's pretty good. 3 simple declarative sentences. They also use the same words for step 7. Take my will in my life, guide me in my recovery, show me how to live. In the 3rd step prayer in the AA Big Book, it's I don't have it memorized. It's written in King James, kind of formal, churchy language with semicolons and stuff, but to turn your will and your life over, to turn your will and your life over. And it's very similar to the prayer put together by the founder of my community, Ignatius Loyola, in the 1500s. It's called the fancy Latin is suscipe, which means receive. Take, Lord, receive. Please accept my memory, my whole will, me. Everything I have, I've received from you already. I return it to you. I'm not going to hold on. I return it to you. Give me your love and your grace, and it's enough. It's a way of living consciously, connectedly, simply. Step 3 for me, the practical work around step 3 is I need to show up. Get out of my room, get out of my head, get out of my isolation, get out of my self-obsession. Show up. Pay attention. Focus, look, hear, feel. Pay attention. I'm a very distracted person. And to pay attention to anything is astonishing. Show up, pay attention, tell the truth. Don't put a spin on it. Tell the truth. And the truth might be, I'm really angry, or I'm really tired, or I'm really happy to see you, or I can't wait to get home. Tell the truth. I feel part of the rhythm of being alive. I feel alienated from anything that's breathing. Tell the truth. Show up, pay attention, tell the truth. And number 4, let go of the results. Because I'm not in charge. The Buddha was a young person with great privilege and a well-established family. And he even has his own family, wife and kids. But it's a bird in a gilded cage, and he gets out of the gilded cage and discovers sickness, poverty, cruelty. He discovered the world as it is in so many places, snakes everywhere and dengue fever and, oh my goodness, cruelty over here and, civilian populations massacred. And he freaks out. How do you make sense out of all this? And he's in India. The Buddha is from India, and he tries to do every spiritual practice that is offered in India, and there's a billion of them. Ever so many ways. Join this group, join that. He's searching, he's restless, he wants answers, he wants a connection. Nothing makes sense to him. He's in crisis, and he finally sits under a tree, and it falls into place. You'll see pictures or statues of the Buddha with something, it's a flame on his head. It made sense. Suffering's everywhere. What's the cause of suffering? Attachment, greed, power and control, attachment. How do I get out of suffering? Let go. And he develops the 4 Noble Truths and a whole bunch of other ways of understanding. But he suddenly relaxes and he becomes much more content and easy to be with. And people notice this huge change and they go up and say, are you a god? Are you a prophet? Are you a guru? What? Tell us. And he said, who are? And he says, I'm not any of those things. They said, what are you? He said, I am awake. And the way I translate that into my own 21st century Oakland Bay Area understanding is he was able to say, I can spot bullshit. And I'm not going to live in a world of bullshit. None of that's important. The literature talks about money and power and prestige, or money and power and authority. Ignatius Loyola will write about riches, honors, pride, all that stuff of I need to acquire more and build more, and look at me, Ozymandias, King of Kings. It's all crap. I've learned what's true, and I want to stay focused in that area. And for me, an awful lot of that has to do with being alive as a human being here and now, today, not living in the past and not living in the future, to be here today. And then what do I do today? Well, I had plants that needed watering. Before I saw you, I watered plants. Some were very happy to see me. I moved a few things around. I made my bed. I showered. I had something to eat. I had 2 cups of coffee. I have laundry to do later on today. Nothing here is magic. It's just the ordinary things of being alive. So they'll say out of the East, they'll ask the question, this enlightenment thing, the Buddha enlightened. What does a person do before enlightenment? Before you can spot true from fake, lie from truth, reality from fantasy. What does a person do before that? And they say, you chop wood and carry water. You live your life. There's food and there's connections and heat and shelter and family. You chop wood, you carry enlightenment. You chop wood and carry water. Ordinary stuff, both feet firmly on the ground. And for me, practically what that means is I get to a meeting, I set up some chairs, I say hello to new people. Not too much. I mean, they don't, just hello, scary old guy, hello. I listen to the person who's speaking. I might share a little bit. Just for a couple minutes, 3 minutes is a lot at a meeting. And then after the meeting, you clean up. And I force myself to do those things because it's so basic and ordinary. I think if you're living whatever the spiritual life is, you're more of a human being, not less of a human being. And to tell the truth, I have flaws and things out of balance and things undone. And oh, yeah, that's me. In the book, 4th edition, I'm just going to go a few more minutes. In one of the stories, they talk about a guy from Chicago working with Dr. Bob. In the English version, it's he sold himself short, short story number 8, and it's on page 263 in the text. And Dr. Bob and this guy worked through the 6 steps. 12 hadn't been invented yet. And then Dr. Bob pointed out problems he thought this guy had. And when I did my 4th step, I wrote about resentments, fears, sexual stuff, and money. Those are crazy-making areas for people, for most people. Dr. Bob's list, he pointed out selfishness, conceit, jealousy, carelessness, intolerance, ill temper, sarcasm, resentments. And I've got all those. My prejudices, I've got cultural stuff, I have racial stuff, I have class consciousness. I mean, there are groups I like, there are groups I don't like. Some of these prejudices are just old ones. If I see a whole group of young people coming onto the train, I'm a little anxious. I have these tendencies. And a power greater than myself can help me grow up and not act on all those, realizing, don't be, well, anyway, improving, growing up, developing, and all that. And I asked the higher power to remove my defects of character. I still have them. If I'm centered, if I've prayed and meditated, if I've eaten, if I've been to a meeting, if I've connected with my sponsor, if I have a spiritual director I need to see this month, he's over in Berkeley named George. I need to spend some time with him. I need to take care of my recovery. I don't have trouble with my defects of character. But if I'm too hungry, too angry, too lonely, too tired, and trying to do too much too fast, something happens, and those defects of character hook up in groups of 2 and 3 and take over. And then I have to promptly admit when I'm wrong and clean up the mess. I do a lot of promptly admitting I'm wrong and cleaning up the mess. Oof. I mentioned at a meeting in Los Angeles that I still get angry. I mean, I watch too much news and I'm surrounded by fools. Well, of course I get angry. And one of our perky Los Angeles alcoholics said, well, if you were really spiritual, you'd never get angry. And I just think that's stupid. What are you, 11 years old? But I didn't say that because that's not helpful. And every second of, or every each year of recovery gives you one more second of response time. So I didn't say my first 5 thoughts. Instead, I said, oh, that's very helpful, which is sarcasm, but it's better. It was choice number 6. I get angry. Also, just to say out loud, I'm getting close to 80. Fear. I have less energy to keep those feelings down. New things frighten me. New technology frightens me. A staircase without a hand railing frightens me. Gravity is a killer. I visited in Spokane one of our friends who gravity just broke a hip. You visit. I notice a lot of things about being a little more. I mean, I'm glad to be alive, and the 70s are really very good. But with more fragility, more easily knocked out of balance. All that's true too. And I need a program that helps me stay very focused one day at a time here and now. I do not obsess about the next 30 years or 30 days. Tomorrow at 7:30 in the morning, I'm doing this. I'm talking with a group of sober priests in Ukraine. I can't tell you how delighted I am. I've done this several times, and how wonderful, Eastern Church, Western Church. One of the guys translates because he's one of those skillful Canadians who has languages. Go to a meeting, return phone calls, listen to people, ask God for help, clean up the mess, tell the truth. And it's good. It's being people. It's being alive. Step 1, step 2, step 3. Step 1, devastating earthquake. Step 2, we're rebuilding. Step 3, we ask God for help and direction. Let me end with just a thing I heard. I didn't invent this, but I heard this at a meeting, and I think it's pretty good. I heard this in Texas at a retreat house near Dallas, Lake Dallas, Texas. And this fellow was sharing. I don't know him. In my memory, he's wearing a cowboy hat, but that might not be true. It was Texas, so I put cowboy hats on all the Texans. He said, serenity prayer. We need serenity because we want to make better decisions. And there's and if you're upset, agitated, in heat, reactive, you don't think clearly. There are things I can change and there are things I cannot change. Here's 3 things I cannot change. I cannot change the past, and I cannot change the truth, and I cannot change you. That frees up the whole day because it's so easy to live in the past. I know some church folk can do that. They're still arguing over the same argument for 1,000 years. You stop it. Can't change the past. Can't change the truth. There's an objective reality out there. Give me an example. Isaac Newton and the laws of physics. To every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. What goes up goes down. The law. One of the reasons I just in terms of emotion and energy, I'm so high, I'm having a wonderful time. I'm so low, what happened? Well, you went way up and you go way down. That's the law. So in my recovery, I want to live in the broad middle. I don't want the up and I don't want the down, broad middle. And I can't change you. This is an Al-Anon truth. Loving someone does not change them. It changes me. And hating someone does not change them. It changes me. And I see this. I mean, I don't have kids. I'm not a married person. I try not to give advice to married persons or moms and dads. I try not to do that because, I don't know. I taught them and I've seen them in stories, but I don't have kids. However, loving someone is frequently a powerless experience. There's so little you can do for people you actually love. Blanche would say, some of us would prefer to feel guilty because we do not want to be powerless. We don't want to feel powerless. Guilt implies there's something we could have done. Can't change the past, can't change the truth, and I can't change it. What can I change? 3 things. That was 6, 3 things. I can change my thinking, and I can change my behavior, and I can change my attitude. And that's the work of the program. That's the work of the steps. That's the work of growing up. That's the work of participating. I think we get recovered to sanity in community. And if you love the community of people in recovery, it's a little easier to be people. I'm going to the International Convention in Vancouver. I've been to most of them, not all, I've been to most of them. And it's inconvenient, there's lines, there's too many people, and it's glorious. You see the whole world gather, and you get to hug German alcoholics, Japanese alcoholics, Mexican alcoholics, Russian alcoholics, alcoholics from Texas. And it's a joy. So, Patrick, I think that's everything I know.
Wow, that's beautiful, Father Tom. Beautiful. Yeah, I love your way you lay it all out in such a beautiful, simple way. This wonderful design for living that we have. So thank you, and it's great to have you with us, Father Tom.